I'm Annie.
And I'm Leah.
And this is Lactation Business Coaching with Annie and Leah, where we talk about the smart way to create a compassionate and professional private practice.
Let's dive in. Hi there. Welcome to our bonus episode. This bonus episode is actually one of the first deeper dives that Anna and I did together. We're delighted to share it with you. Enjoy.
So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through, we have a couple of discussion questions about care plans. And then at the very end, anybody who is using Intake Queue, I'm going to be actually running through a demo of my new care plans for Intake Queue to show you how I'm now doing my care plans in Intake Queue. So if you're using Intake Queue, it will be interesting. If you're not, it'll give you a chance to see what Intake Queue looks like, or you can just be done and we'll say goodbye. And I'll do it for an audience of no one. If you all feel like leaving, it's fine with me.
Is anybody else on Intake Queue? I'm just curious because I'm on Intake Queue. Marie is on Intake Queue.
Oh, good. Yeah. So we have a couple.
Okay, a couple.
And we have we have people who aren't here who are going to get the recording. So I'm going to do it for them too. So,
yes.
So Leah, what is our first question about care plans?
Yeah. So we want to know from you what you feel like makes a great care plan in your perspective when you're working with your client. What feels like a great care plan to you? What are the, components of it that you think, or what makes it great? Does anybody want to share?
I think it needs to be general enough that it applies to at least almost all of the clients that you're going to send that care plan to. I don't know if there's an opportunity to add more specific instructions if there's a special circumstance, but it just needs to be general enough and simple enough that it applies to everybody that you would give it to, I guess.
Can you think of specific example of something like that? Maybe not necessarily you, Katina, or if somebody's hearing what Katina's saying and has an example of what that would look like.
Well, I just think a triple feeding plan, if you're doing a finish at the breast situation, I actually have two separate care plans for triple feeding, and one is a standard triple feeding plan, and then another one is a finish at the breast triple feeding plan, because although generally we're trying to achieve the same thing, I think it's just a really different way to go about that.
Yeah. So you're kind of looking at they're general, but they're not one size fits all, but you're also not reinventing the wheel every single time.
Yeah. Or if you're doing triple feeding with an SNS, that looks very different than triple feeding with a bottle for the parents. So I feel those need to be separate care plans.
I think also there's a distinction that could be made between a care plan versus a protocol. And I think sometimes people merge those two things are together, and then some people think of those things separately. So a care plan might be, I'm going to have you do triple feeding, and I'm going to refer you to body work, and I'm going to give you oral exercises. That would be the care plan. The protocol would be your triple feeding protocol, your body work, kind of what you say about that. This is body work, there's some links about it, here's some of my referral sources, and then oral exercises would be specific for whatever issues that baby was having. So you'd have that as your protocol for that. I wonder if that helps think about the differences between the two. So yeah, your protocols would be more generalized because you might tweak them separate a little bit, like you're describing, okay, this is a finish at the breast, the different ways you could come about it. You could have those all differentiated out, but then combining those all together was what makes your care plan complete with other aspects. Some people do, I think, and I'd love to hear what you guys do, very personalized care plans where you're speaking directly to the person and you have almost a letter to them, with some, writing specifically to their situation and letting them know you're there for them and those kind of things. And then some people give very clinical, it's just here are my 3 protocols that I'm sending you, and let me know if you have any questions. So I think people approach it differently. So we were talking about what do you think makes a great care plan? Does anybody else want to jump in on that?
We had some in the chat. Odelia said, have a rationale and a timeline. And by timeline, she means when patients should expect improvement, which is different from the length of the intervention. I love that distinction, thinking about some of these things, like kind of staying on the triple feeding. And for those of you that don't use the term triple feeding, that means when you have a parent who is breastfeeding, supplementing outside of the breast, and expressing their milk with a breast pump or with their hands. So something like that, you're like, well, you would expect to see improvement, but you need to keep going with it.
Does anybody else want to share about what you think makes a great care plan? I think Janet also shared in the text about it's worded for the family, using terms that would make sense to them. And I think that's so helpful to like incorporate the family in creating the care plan versus, you know, just us saying like, this is what you should do, but really pulling them in and helping them engage their intuition. Because I think a lot of families kind of know some of the things that they need to do. And if we engage them, they really take so much ownership of it. I don't know if that's been y'all's experience, but when I have them make choices like, well, we could go this route or this route, what seems the best to you, and they make a choice one way or the other, I feel like then they're all on board. But if I'm just like, oh, here's what you should be doing, they're like, oh, it seems so hard, or, you know, couldn't we be doing more, you know, that kind of thing. So it's like, that helps a lot. Anybody else have anything else you want to say about what makes a great care plan? Any other feedback?
I like what Jen says too, that she loves a lot of detail, but it doesn't work for all of her clients. And that kind of goes in with what I said about wording for the family. If the family can't repeat it and understand it, then they're not going to do it. They're going to bypass what I wrote in the plan. And I really feel like that works well, especially if English isn't their first language, because German or Spanish or Somali, those aren't my first languages. So we have to kind of settle on some things that work for them that I can write in that plan so that then I can chart on it. And sometimes my shorthand speak, you know, doesn't make sense to them. So I think I really like that detail thing, because I can get pretty detailed as well, same as Jen, and then it turns into something else. So trying to keep it simple, sweetie.
The care plan is fluid, right? So it can change from, you know, day to day or even week to week. So it's sort of piggybacking on what you're saying. I do think that even if the situation is complicated and you know that from the get-go, they're not necessarily ready to hear all of that right away, right? Because oftentimes they're so overwhelmed. So that care plan will most likely change in a week, and keeping it simple for them, like you're saying, even though we know that sort of phase 2 of that care plan will become a little more complex. But if it's too much information right away, I think it backfires, and then they feel like they're failing, and you get all those texts and those calls for follow-ups, you know, because they're nervous or they're scared or it's not working. And yeah, so I guess I'm sort of saying the same thing you are, that keeping it simple, but then also remembering that plan will have to change for them.
And like we were saying, having a timeline in there. So let them know, okay, we're going to start here, and then we're going to check back in at this time, and giving them a foresight of like, and things are going to change. We're going to try some different things at that time, or we're going to add on some things if you guys are ready, or we're going to do a different referral once we're ready. They can't see that far out like we can.
Right.
Like, we can see how this is going to go so much easier. But, you know, I remember being in that place, like all you can see is like this moment right here, and this is how it's always going to be. So we have to help carry them along that vision. I think that's so helpful. And yeah, so from that point, what are you guys doing as far as like right now? I know we're all virtual, so we're probably all digitally giving people their care plans right now. But what does your transmission of care plan look like? Is it in real time, like the second you're typing it, it's getting to them? Is it by the end of the day? Is it you're collecting resources and making sure they have it at a certain timeline? What are you guys doing as far as care plan? And you can even talk about, you know, if you are seeing people in person, what does that look like as well? Anybody want to share what you're doing right now?
So I don't hand them a care plan. If they're seeing me in person, a lot of people I know hand them a paper to go home with. And to me, that's really redundant because I always send an email and a link to their record that has that information in it. And so I tell them, like, if they're coming to see me, that I'll send you something by the end of the evening, because then I go home and chart. And then it'll have all that stuff in it, their plan and everything. And then, like, if you have any questions, make sure you call me tomorrow and we can like clarify anything you don't understand. And I'm doing the same thing with my virtual visits. I'm charting as soon as I finish with the visit, and then sending them an email and a link to their profile that has all that stuff in it.
I mean, I know I like you, I send mine electronically in that same way. Like, it's all in this document that you're going to get. It's all in one place. I used to do a combo. I had ordered a bunch of brochures from Noodle Soup, I think, with positioning that I would hand out. So I would leave those behind, something paper. I never left behind like written instructions, but I would leave those resources behind. Or I got the tear sheets about paste bottle feeding and pumping. I really liked those. And those ones had copyright on them that said you can't transmit them digitally. So you weren't allowed to scan them and send them. But I had a client who was like unhappy with me, and she sent me this email. It's like a couple of years ago, one of those emails that you never forget, where she was just like, you just stared at me, and like I was watching her baby, all the things. But what, like, this line that I'll never forget was, she said, and then you left me with these brochures that looked like you stole them from the hospital.
Oh my gosh.
The happy ending of that story was that I did write her back, and I was like, thank you so much for sharing your feedback with me. While painful to hear, I always welcome the opportunity to reflect upon and improve my practices. Would be happy to come back for a free follow-up. And she took me up on the free follow-up, and she was so nice to me. And neither one of us ever spoke about the fact that she accused me of stealing brochures from a hospital.
Oh, wow. I like the paste bottle feeding one because it has Spanish on the back.
Yeah.
And that has saved me so many times that I needed, like in Spanish for either the family or like the grandparent who's helping, and I could give it to them right then. I'm like, read this right now while we're sitting here. And it was so helpful because it helped us, get on the same page. That's so funny though, about the hospital thing.
I have a bunch of Amish families that come up to see me. And then like, you're like, oh, you don't have email. And so then it would be helpful to have some brochures that you can hand them, because there's not a way to get them all that.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, like, the technology access is a barrier, can be a barrier if you're doing electronic care plans.
Yeah, I sometimes use the literally GB leaflets. They're really good handouts, and I get them at the conference.
I usually do digital, just like you, Annie, and I just send them, when I was doing home visits, by the end of the day, right after the visit. But occasionally I do write down, especially if it's something like triple feeding or something, and the parents just aren't grasping like how much supplementation, or they've asked me that question 3 times, then I'd rather just tear off a little sheet on my legal pad and just like quickly jot it down and be like, I'll give you more specific instructions later, but just like for this feed and next feed, if you need just something written down that you have with you right now, then I'll leave that.
I also had like a little template when we used to do paper charts. We had a template for our care plans when we did it all paper. And I just keep printing those off, and I have a stack in my bag, because I also carry like just one paper chart in my bag in case all technology hates me that day. Mm-hmm. And this has actually come in handy a few times where either the parents were not grasping, or they were having some technology, like we're not going to be able to get to email or whatever issues they were having. It's actually saved me a few times and made me feel better, like knowing for sure they had something in front of them that I left. Just make sure you take a picture of whatever you leave with them and have that in your chart as well. So just you have that documentation.
I just actually finished with a client before I came on, so I'm just after sending off the care plan, and it's I use Intake Q as well. So I suppose I do a mix of it when I'm thinking about it. So I'm checking off the box on what we've talked about, and then I kind of add a little note into that that's personal to what we talked about as well. And then I add some links in as well, and send that on, and just say, we'll follow up in 2 days' time. And I usually try and get that out within 24 hours.
Yeah.
I make a distinction between instructions and protocols. So like instructions are like, this is what you're going to do for breastfeeding, supplementation, expression, and like any referrals that I'm making. And that's like individual to the client. And I keep those really simple and short. And then I have protocols are kind of, I've started to think of them more like a magazine article. Like, here's what I ended up like, and you'll see if you stick around for the end when I show you what mine look like in Intake Q. I kind of started was like, I'm just going to write down what I always say about this thing. Like I always say this about how, how milk production works. So let me just write that down. And then I added links to the articles, my favorite articles about that topic. So they're kind of getting something that is super general. Like it's just sort of like, this applies to just this whole entire thing, regardless of what specific instructions I've given you. And then here's where you can read more. And I'm feeling like the feedback from my clients has been positive, that I think they like having it separate that way versus like, okay, now this is what she wants me to do. And now here's 3 articles about it, and jumping off to read the 3 articles. And then I think they forget to come back. This way it's like super clear of like, here's what I want you to do. Here's stuff to read at 2 o'clock in the morning to save you from Googling this thing.
That's a great point.
When you give your client a care plan, how are you following up with them about implementation or questions they have? What does that process kind of look like for you? Because I guess like the care plan is sort of inexplicable or inseparable. Inexplicable, no, that should be fully explicable. Inseparable from your follow-up policies. So how do those work together? What kind of policies do you have? Like Elizabeth had mentioned, she makes a phone call the next day to check in and make sure they got it. I have an automated email that goes out the day after that reminds them to look in the portal for their care plan. How are you guys following up with your clients?
I include a follow-up phone call within 48 hours. So that's just a matter of course. I always call. There's some parents who don't pick up the phone and they never call me back, and I don't feel the need to like keep after them or anything. They'll pick up the phone and they'll call me if they want me. But I think a lot of parents want that check-in. I did appreciate it when I was having lactation issues. My only pain point with that is when the parents, like maybe things are much better and now they want to change the care, they want to change the care plan now, or they want to like evolve to the next step. And I feel like that doesn't belong in that follow-up phone call. That belongs in a follow-up visit, like to change the plan. And sometimes it's tricky, and I haven't always been able to get around that. And so I don't know. I'm still struggling with that one.
Jen is saying she does a very quick 1-line email. How are things going? Just wanted to check in. And she does that in about 2 days if they haven't reached out to her sooner. And Odelia is saying she tells the client to contact her if they're not seeing improvement by the timeline. So she's kind of basing that follow-up on when she told the family they would see care. Eileen is also doing a phone call 24 hours and a text 48 hours to check in. So staying on top of just, making sure that they are reading the care plan, that they know that you're available to them. I try to do that on a more of an ad hoc basis. I mean, I have the automated email that goes out, but I sort of like when I'm looking at my calendar and, prepping for visits or whatever, when I'm in my charting platform, I'll see the people. I'll be like, oh yeah, I want to see how they're doing. And so I'll just send a little ad hoc message. I find, I don't know if others of you take insurance, I see a lot of insurance clients who just get multiple visits. So I actually don't check in with them between visits because we're scheduling a follow-up visit before we leave. So that's the last thing that happens in a consult. I'm going to see you again I had somebody I saw yesterday, our follow-up is tomorrow, but it might be a week later. And I'll say, great, we'll reconnect in a week and see how things are going. And so in those cases, I actually don't check in. I don't touch, give any like touch points with them because I already have something in the calendar.
I'm curious for those of you who do your check-ins, say, 24 hours or 2 days later, what your workflow is for that. Do you set a reminder on your phone? Is it like, how do you ensure you are able to do that? What are you usually doing for that?
I'm looking at a note from Joy. She says she sends a quick message and then she says she uses Practice Better and sets tasks for them and for herself. I don't know if you're able to unmute yourself, but I'm super curious to hear a little bit more about those tasks that you're doing. You can pop in the chat if you, oh,
I have a fussy toddler, but yeah, so I definitely am not always 100% about my end of the follow-up, because I do trust that they, if they need me, that they will follow up. But I have found that since I've moved to Practice Better, that setting tasks is helpful. So when I write my care plan, it's sort of what you've all been saying, and like the personalized stuff. And then I have resources separate. And then I have next steps. And under the next steps, like I'll have, pediatrician appointment as scheduled for Monday, check in with me at your convenience after that. And so if that was the case, then I would put a task for Monday for them to check in with me. And then I would put it on my tasks for me to check in with them on Tuesday if I haven't heard from them yet, so that then they have it sort of the reminder within the system that that's, on them to check in. But then if I haven't heard from them, I want to reach out to them just so they know that I, care about what's going on with them and that I'm there for them if they need any support. And I pretty much do all of my follow-up check-ins through the Practice Better secure messaging. So I just send them a message and just say like, hey, just wondering if, you have any updates or questions after your appointment yesterday. And then if they respond, we either message back and forth or schedule a follow-up.
And Intake Q has the tasks feature as well. And they also have like automated tasks that you can do. So I have that set up to automate me some tasks that I always want to make sure I do. And then I'll add other tasks in if I'm like, oh yeah, I wanted to call back and see how their pediatrician appointment went, or, what their last weight check was or something. And especially now, I don't know about everybody else, but pandemic brain is a thing. Like pregnancy brain is a thing. I'm like, pandemic brain feels like a thing because my brain is not firing the way I used to be able to just remember like, oh, that person. I don't know if it's like the virtual aspect of it because everything seems so redundant. I'm hearing the same screen all the time. I don't know if that's it or if it's like just the stress of everything, but I'm definitely utilizing the Intake Q task like a ton now. And I love the feature where you can have automated tasks created for you. So if I'm always going to check in with somebody in 48 hours, but you want it to be a personalized message, I do like that where you can just like automate it and then you can just like a checkbox and it's so nice. You can click them off. It's very nice.
I love that. I use it also. I want them to do it the way Joy is saying they have it for Practice Better, which is giving tasks to the client too.
That would be so cool.
That would be amazing. So everybody who's on Intake Q, please send them a feature request because I think that would be so awesome. And yeah, anything that is automated is better for me in these days. I have a subcontractor who works in my practice. She has 2 little kids at home. Like one of them is a baby. So she doesn't work a ton, but I want to supervise what she's doing. And even with the fact that she's not carrying also it's like pandemic, like nobody's carrying that heavy of a client load right now, let's be honest. But I could never remember to go in and like, does she have a consult tomorrow? Do I need to check her form? I always want to review the intake forms and give notes to her. So now I have it set up that when someone submits an intake form for her, I get a task assigned to me in Intake Queue that says review this client's charts. And that's super helpful because I was like, wait, when do you have a visit? What am I supposed to do? And now it's like easy. And then that's been really great. I forget where I was going with that. Oh, and then I also like by standardizing my protocols, a big motivation for doing the cleanup I did of my care plans, which were pretty like copy and paste. Like I love Phrase Express, but it was kind of like a lot of just like do this, do that, and then I would paste it, then I would tweak it, and I really felt like I needed to standardize what I was doing because the system I had was not communicating well to her. Like she was still being like, what do we tell people for this? And I'm like, oh, because I never wrote it down. It's just in my head. And even like whatever I built in Phrase Express, like I was forgetting that I was adding to that every time. So I did a lot of work for her, and then it's good because now I'm like, okay, now we're consistent in our messaging.
Anybody else have any workflow related things they want to share about their care plan? I would love to know if you have any specific workflow that you use to ensure your care plans are done, maybe some time savers or hacks, like give us all those. I know, with Annie's intake queue, that makes it super fast, but I'd love to know if anybody else has anything else related to like efficiency or hacks or things like that you're using to create your care plans. Everybody looks bewildered. No, we're all just tediously clacking away at them. Yes, Jen.
So, I mean, I've said this for years, and it took me a long time to go paperless. I just did in January. And so for 5 years, I had been writing care plans. But I had said to Annie so many times, like, those protocols that I have all typed up, and I send those individually by email because they got too long when I would send a bunch of them. So I want people to just look up the topic, like my triple feeding email, and it has a whole protocol. I wanted that incorporated with my care plan, so I didn't have to go and send 10, 15 emails and do a care plan. And so that's been a struggle, but I think that's probably what she's going to be talking about later. It's not hard. It's like, I have it all in templates and I just click the template and send the email, but it gets tedious and I'm sick of doing that. But when you put it within the care plan, it feels super long too. So it's hard.
Yeah, definitely. I think maybe one other question that might be good for all of us to share is, because I think maybe it was Joy that said it, like she has next steps, but like if you were to break down your care plan, what's in your care plan? So it sounds like a lot of us have like brief instruction at top, kind of like, what do I want you to do? What's the first thing I want you to remember? But then what does the rest of the flow of your care plan look like? I think that would be really interesting to hear what you're putting in your care plan and how it flows down, how the parent is going to read that. Does anybody want to share?
I'll go again because I put everything. So what I did when I went to intake queue in January was I took everything that I typically wrote down and I put it all in the care plan so I could just like check boxes. So I didn't have to rewrite everything 5 times. So all the standard things and then all the specific things. So my specific things in my intake queue care plan, if I don't need it for that person, like if I don't need my vasospasm section, I just delete that out of the care plan. And it's worked well, but what I found is like, even when I have just check boxes, like for example, the exercises I give, like, bebop boop or whatever I check those, but I also want to write more every time. And I wanted to have a care plan that I could just check so I could do it quickly. But I still find that I want to write a bunch of stuff too, and it makes it too long. And so I need to like cut back on that, and it's hard for me to do.
I know I really like a personalized message at the top. So I always write something personalized in the beginning. Like, it was so nice to meet you and Lily today. She's so adorable. And I just love her little blonde hair, like something just to connect us a little bit more. And I find that's the only thing with intake queue I'm struggling with. So I'm like, where do you put something like that? So I made a place to put it, which is beautiful about intake queue. But so anybody else want to share kind of what you put in? How does your flow for your care plan go?
Joyce posted in the comments that she has templates, links instead of attachments. She creates resource pages on her website. Anything you do or say the same way. I try to find a way to streamline the process for myself and my client. And here's a tip. If you have G Suite for your email, you can make a Google site in G Suite that could be not public. It's not a public website. It could be just, here's where your protocols are. And Maria, by protocols, we're meaning like what instructions we're kind of always giving people. Like, here's what we're always saying about bottle feeding, for example. Like, so like kind of a version of a handout, but it's something that you wrote yourself. Or you could have, gotten it. It could be a handout, but so you could make that on a Google site if you don't want to have it on your public website, or if you want to make videos, but you don't want them searchable on YouTube, you could put them on a Google site and have them just be available to your clients. So that's an option for creating those resource pages if you're not using something like Practice Better or Intake Queue. Yeah, Maria.
Yeah, I haven't heard of protocols. So would you just, like what you were saying, creating your own, would you like brand them then with your own branding, and so then they're kind of yours? You're not going to be reinventing the wheel with the information. It's going to be pretty much the same information. You know, for paste bottle feeding, you can't exactly, but you're creating it for your website. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like,
exactly.
you know how everybody has a different way they explain things, you know, so you might have an analogy that you use, or a certain way you explain some technique, or you might find with your population, this one strategy of, you know, whatever works better or has worked traditionally for you. And so although there's 10 strategies, you explain it one way and have the things that you anecdotally have found work best for your clients. And so you make a protocol about that. Like say it's plug ducts, and you just know that your clients love the way you explain it, you know, like this, and they love these 3 strategies for clearing it. And that would become your protocol, but you wouldn't necessarily put it out into the world and say, hey, everybody, this is how you fix a plug duct. Some people do, you know, but it would be really just geared towards your client's use because it's your wording and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so you just kind of keep a file of your own protocols and then share them with your clients when you're doing care plans. Yeah?
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
And I'll be showing you how I do that in Intake Q at the end.
Fab. Great.
Yeah, I know. I'm always so grateful for Joy is saying I don't put anything clinical or that I've created for clients publicly, but kudos to those who do and share. Yes, thank you to everyone who creates resources for their website, like the kind that Jen Deshays, who's on here right now, she maintains the resource collection that I have through Paperless Lactation. It's anything that you love that is in the resource collection, it's because Jen found it. And she's so good at finding those links, and really people are writing great stuff. That's not everybody's skill set or desire to do that. But so I'm like, yes, like Joy, I'm super grateful for everyone who does do that because I use them all the time.
Does anybody else want to share about the content of, you know, like how many people do a personalized message somewhere on their care plan? Something speaking directly to the client. Yeah. I think that's pretty common.
I always forget to, I'm so tired. I should. Natalie, who works with me, she always writes something very sweet in the instructions, and it's so caring. And when I was reviewing, I was like, oh yeah, I should do that. I probably used to do it and it fell by the wayside, probably because I don't have a box in my template that prompts me to do it. But it is such a nice touch. Really shows them that you put effort into it and attention and are thinking of them, which is what the care plan is all about. It's for them. I always tell them, this is not a prescription. This is a guide. This is a map to get you where you have told me you want to go. So one of the things that I've heard a couple of different people say, this is definitely not original to me by any stretch, that the best care plans are ones that families participate in creating. And Leah, you are the one that talks about how, like, you did talk about it on the podcast where you're like, oh, tell me to write that down, or like, I'm going to write that down.
I was just doing that on a virtual consult yesterday because the dad was holding the camera and the mom, of course, is latching the baby. And the dad's like, we're not writing any of this down. So they both like start panicking and the camera's like going wild. And I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. Like, just tell me what you want me to write. And I'm writing it right now and it'll go with you. It'll come to you in the care plan. And they were like, oh, wow, thank you so much. And I just make sure like throughout, I was like, okay, I'll write that down. It's like anything you want me to write down, don't worry, you guys don't have to try to do that, because it's even harder with the virtual because I need the other parent, the non-birthing parent, non-breastfeeding parent to like be the camera holder. So I don't need them writing, whereas they used to be the writer, you know, like write that down. Now I am. Yeah.
I think, you know, about the care plan that the family creates, I think that's a really good point, that they participate in that and that they own it. But every once in a while you run into like where the parents aren't on the same page, where mom and dad are disagreeing about what should happen. And I remember one visit where the baby needed to be supplemented and the dad was really combative about how much or how often. And we're like, well, we could do this a few different ways. You know, I recommend this much this often, but if you want to do less more often, that's okay. We just need to make sure baby gets. And he was just really, really combative, I guess is the word. It was still while I was a student, and my mentor and I kept looking at each other like,
well, that's why the care plan is also so important, because it documents your recommendations, and the parents in the end make the choice if they follow it, but at least it documents your recommendations. And I think that would be such a hard situation to be in. I don't know that I have
So
been
hard.
in that
I've
exact
had
situation.
I've had kind of the opposite situation. This was very, very early in my private practice. And this might have even been in like the first year that I was seeing clients. And in that first year, I was maybe doing one visit a week. So I was very inexperienced. And I think I always remember it. It was such a learning moment. It was a family who I came back for the second visit with them for the follow-up. And we had the mom was working on increasing her supply. And at some point in the consult, I think I noticed that I was talking to the dad, and he and I were working out this care plan. And I remember, I will never forget looking at her and her face. She was so shut down, she was gone. She was like, I'm not involved. She was, experiencing some postpartum depression. Clearly what we were talking about doing with her was not taking her input, her goals, her feelings into account at all. And I had not picked up on that. And just realizing what a mistake that was for me, to just get carried away with I know what to do. Here's the right thing. Here's how we fix this. And I was getting feedback from her husband that, yeah, okay, yeah, we can do that. And I was so inexperienced that I just didn't. And I'll never forget that family, because I definitely let her down by not reading her signs, reading her cues, and by not having a goal-oriented strategy towards coming up with the care plan. I was just like, no, this is just what you do. You got to do it this way. I was too confident, as a new lactation consultant. I will always feel bad for how I let her down, but I definitely, it affected me and changed how I looked at these, coming up with these care plans.
I think that's so valuable, lessons that we learn early on. Painful lessons, but we learned a lot of those early on. So Annie, do you want to share, just look at the intake queue?
Yeah, so let me get that set up. If you, feel free to jump out if you're not interested in seeing it. You are going to get the replay too. So let me do a screen share.
But it's really cool. So if you want to, I would recommend looking at it. I'm so excited about it.
All right, so let me do the screen share. Okay, hopefully I think everybody can see my screen. So here is, oh my gosh, I'm gonna make you nauseated by, okay, here's the care plan. So I have this as a note template that they can add and create new notes. So it's called Care Plan. City Lactation is the name of my practice. So you will see that I have these specific instructions. So up here, I can click this box, breastfeeding, and it pops open this whole section. So these are kinds of the very specific things. I want you breastfeeding as you've been, means keep doing what you've been doing. Or there's some finish at the breast in here. There's also do switch feeding. How about using the nipple shield? So kind of a lot of different specific things. I also have, if I have them needing to supplement, I click that box and it pops this open. And supplement, this is how many times, this is what I want you to use, this is how I want you to do it. And there's always space here for additional instructions. I'm going to scroll back up. I also include, let's look at working with your baby. If I click that, I'm actually going to unclick these so you'll see that they go away. So if I'm not using them, they're not visible at all. So I've got these different ideas of things I might tell. These are some of the oral exercises, body movements, some things that I got from Jen. So a lot of the stuff that I'm sharing clinically, I can't take credit for it. I didn't invent it. I didn't write it. It's what I've learned. And that's why I don't sell protocols, because I've gotten them from other people and it's based on my clinical experience and education. But this is just kind of showing you I can just click off these little boxes and then I can use snippets for okay, here's exactly what this one is. something that I took verbatim from Supporting Sucking Skills by Kathy Jenna. So I can add those additional instructions as snippets because they would get kind of long if they were up here. So I can use snippets for those. Now let me hide this. So here's where the real magic happens. These little additional instructions. Your baby is beautiful. That's where I would write a little personal note, which I'm going to get better at doing. So now I've given them their specific instructions, and now I get down to these protocols. So again, I've written all these, but they're based on what I've learned, trainings I've gotten. Some of them are even wording I've gotten from other people, from my mentors or my colleagues. So, because I am never going to write a clinical textbook. That's not my thing, and I'm fine with that. So let's say I'm seeing a family for the first time. I will pop open these protocols, let's say for normal supply. Let's do positioning and latch. And now let's say that the mom has got some plugged ducts. So I click that box. These little protocols pop open. So I'll show you, if I uncheck that box, oh, it's gone. It's not there. I click it, it pops open. And so basically, here's where I wrote a few paragraphs, exactly how I always say it. And then I have a list of links that they can click. Positioning and latch. These are, my feeling, things that I think are important in my own words, or sometimes quoted from some training that I've gotten. And then you'll see that when I paste a video, it actually embeds the video, and it looks really nice because then the family sees, oh, it's a video, and I don't have to write video. And then down here for plugged ducts and mastitis, so I've got sort of a bunch of ideas, some links, some videos. And then here I've actually added the PDF that Alechli did several years ago from the 8th edition of Womanly Art. I've actually included that PDF. So instead of handing it to them or emailing it to them as an attachment, it's just right in here. At the bottom, I can add additional instructions if I want to do something specific, like feel better. I can add additional attachments if I want to. Although I ended up basically started when I was coming up with these, I took all of the PDFs that I've collected over the years that I have permission to distribute electronically. And I was like, I never want to email or attach another PDF again. I'm just going to put them all into these protocols. And then down here, this gets as part of the flow in Intake Q. This gets pulled from the chart. So you won't see it here because I haven't done any weights for this baby, but it would actually show the WHO growth chart, and it pulls over the baby's weight at today's visit at the very bottom. So I'm gonna pop into my forms, and I'm gonna show you what I did to make that happen. So in order to make that happen, I had to build all of these protocols in the Smart Editor, which lets you have headings. It lets you embed links. It's also, that's how you get those videos. It shows you. So what it looks like here is what it's going to look like to the family when they get it. And then I have this list. Okay, let's see. Let's go here. Protocols and resources. So each one gets listed. So these are those check boxes that I was checking. So I built that in multiple choice, multiple answer. And then I go here to rules, and you do a new rule. If the answer to the question in specific instructions equals supplementation, so meaning if I've checked the box for supplementation, then show question, supplementation instructions, and then you save it. I've already built this, so I'm not going to save it, but that's how you get it. Otherwise, if this box is not checked, this won't be shown. And I've been super happy with this because what it means is that if I'm changing protocols, if I'm like, oh, I need to add something, Jen found a new link for the resource collection for positioning and latch, and I've got to put it in there, I just have to put it in here. I just can add it right here. You'll see that you're able to embed the links, and you do that by when you paste a link in, it gives you this, the URL goes here and the text goes there. So you don't have to have the long string of text. You can have the actual language for what they would be finding. So I'm going to stop my screen share and see if anybody has any questions.
Annie, you didn't mention how you put a video on there. Is that something different?
Oh yeah, you just paste the link. And when you paste the link, if it's a YouTube video, it automatically does that.
Awesome. That's so cool. Yay.
It's my new
Thank
toy.
you for being so smart and figuring all that out.
I'm not going to take like full credit. There were ideas that I got from this that I synthesized because I've been doing intake queue customizations for people. And somebody asked me to do they're like, can you do some hidden questions? And then somebody else, like people have been talking a lot in the, like just about how that smart editor formats things so nicely. And I think there was just a day where it like came together. I was like, oh, I could do conditional rules and have formatting together at last. And the feedback from my clients has been really nice because then I feel like it's at the bottom, like the instructions are at the top. Then if they want to keep reading, there's all this stuff. Yeah, and I'm just been very happy with it. So yeah, and then just what's really nice is that when my subcontractor says, she wants clarification, like, but what about this? Or she'll say, actually, can we add this? I can add it into our protocol, or I can refer her to the protocol. It's almost like it's little like mini textbook for her in a lot of ways, like, so we can be consistent in our recommendations and our practices.
Love it. Awesome. Janet, I saw you earlier have your hand raised. Did you have something else you wanted to say or share?
Well, I typed it in there too because Joy and Odelia are like, we're going to do this. Like, this looks great. And I'm like, man, what am I doing where I'm at in the EHR I'm in? But then I realized, oh yeah, but I'm just barely starting to get those things put into mine. And, I finally kind of have a workflow that is working for me. I'm working smarter, not harder. I have more options because I've actually uploaded everything and added the text box so that I can add extra things to my protocols in the EHR that I'm using now. So I loved that. That was so slick, and I really have a deep affection for really nice tech. So intake queue, man, that looks amazing. But I also know that like I would have all the EHRs if I could, and so I kind of got to reel it back. But wow, that was gorgeous. Thank you for sharing, Annie. I really like that.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun. I mean, hey, I love tech. I do have all the EHRs. I think, like Joy was saying, jealous of those who mentioned intake queue. And you can build protocols. I'm sure you know this, Joy, but anybody who's watching who hasn't tried either intake queue or Practice Better lets you build beautiful protocols and lets you even give like little like recommendations. So that feature, that platform also does those kinds of templated protocols that are beautifully formatted with embedded emails, like really, really well. So it's just as good of a platform. And what I like about both of them is I love to be able to tweak, just want to tweak. I'm always changing things. So yeah. And so I will tell you, for anybody that has the toolkit, I'm going to be making a shareable version of this available as an upgrade to the toolkit. It might not happen like tomorrow because I have to do a few things. I have to make it, I'm not going to give you my protocols because they're not mine to give in a lot of ways, but I will be, I'm working on the best way to share it so that it'll be easy to implement, and making a video that goes with that. And it might take me a couple of weeks, but that is coming. So that will be something that will be available as a toolkit upgrade very soon.
Awesome. I'm excited about that. Does anybody have anything, closing remarks or anything else they want to say about care plans or anything else anybody wants to share? Well, it's been so great to have you guys here today on another deeper dive with us. I always love these because I feel like I get so much out of them as you guys do. It's just so great to be with your colleagues and sharing how we're all making this job work for us and helping these families. So thank you guys all for joining us today. Bye guys. Take care.
Bye.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend and leave us a review. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode.